Hi everyone, welcome to the next screencast. What we're going to be doing over the next few videos is looking at the start of the OCR A-level history 1930s through to 1997 Britain. And we're going to start off with Churchill and the wilderness years. It's going to be two videos. This is the first of those two videos. We're just going to basically go through brief revision ideas, so you've got a good understanding to go alongside the notes that you've made in class. And obviously, if you've got any further questions relating to anything, just stick it in the comments at the bottom. So these are the four reasons that Churchill was seen as being in the wilderness: Indian independence, abdication crisis, appeasement, and German expansionism. And we're going to look at Indian independence and the abdication crisis today. Let's start with Indian independence. Okay, then. So, Indian independence wasn't just India. Post World War One, there was quite a few nations who were starting to want independence from the British Empire, and there had been an increase in calls for this. India probably is one that is most notable, mainly because of Churchill's views on India. A couple of important things to remember about Indian nationalism and the increase in Indian nationalism is the Indian National Congress, the INC, and these are the kind of group that was put together, an official group put together that wanted further independence from Britain, and these are the ones who really made a push on it. Indian nationalism also increased quite dramatically after the Amritsar massacre, where this was a protest basically, and the British Empire Army basically retaliated with violence. Around about 400 people were killed by troops, over 1,000 injured, and this actually led to the rise in nationalism quite significantly. And obviously, underlying all of this stuff is Gandhi, Gandhi's role within it. And Gandhi was someone who really pushed civil disobedience. One prime example of this would be the Salt March in 1930, which was about the salt tax. This was, again, it was civil disobedience, so obviously causing a bit of issues, but nothing violent or anything like that. This Salt March actually led to quite a few arrests, Gandhi being one of them, and Gandhi was arrested. Now, whether or not that was a good thing, you could be questioned, because obviously this led to Gandhi gaining a bit more of a following and being recognised within India as someone who, I don't know, martyrdom or idol, and someone who could really lead the push for independence for India. Now, in terms of Indian independence, there's major views and differences between Churchill and the government. The government actually released Gandhi from prison and invited him over for roundtable talks to discuss the possibility of further independence. The British government were really worried about the rise in nationalism, the rise in violence, and they knew basically that something had to be done about it. So they invited Gandhi over as a representative of the INC, of Indian people, etc., to come over and to discuss the possibilities. And all of these things really led to the Government of India Act in 1935, which was actually started in 1937. And this was basically, giving India a bit more independence, a bit more autonomy. Some key thing, or a couple of key things, I suppose, that came out of this was the kind of breaking up, boundaries being created in different parts of India. So there was a bit more autonomy within India, not just India itself, but actually within provinces, etc. And around about 35 million people were added to the electorate. Now, it's quite a lot, 35 million people added to the electorate who could vote, get involved in legislation, etc. When the population's 330 plus million, then maybe it's seen as a drop in the ocean. But it does show progression and does show that things were getting better. Now, Churchill obviously wasn't very happy about this for a number of reasons. Now, I don't want to go into my personal opinions on this too much, but some people actually believe that Churchill was something of a racist, potentially, and this was based on his, views of other nations. And there is some substance in what he's saying in that argument, sorry, based on what he's saying. So one of the things would be about Anglo-Saxon superiority. He also said that basically India were a burden to Britain and that they had no way of governing themselves. They weren't civil like the British were. They weren't as advanced as us. They wouldn't be able to survive on their own. India was also seen as the jewel in the crown of the British Empire in Churchill's eyes, and had been for some time. And by losing India, we would be losing resources, we would be losing trade points, we'd be losing a lot of power, and potentially look a lot weaker on a national scale if we were to lose India. The other thing is as well, we lose India, what is the domino effect going to be like? Are other nations going to follow suit and want to leave the British Empire? So that was a major concern. And Churchill also was concerned, or it certainly put forward the view that he was concerned about the concerns for Indian Muslims, who would be the minority within India, and that the potential would be for persecution, and that Britain's role within India was potentially to keep these people safe and to act as some sort of peacekeeper between the Hindus, Sikhs, etc., and Muslims. Whether or not he's saying this because he is losing an argument, or he doesn't want to come across as being racist or having other archaic views, but it is certainly a view that Churchill put across. Okay, the second thing that we're going to look at in this quick video on wilderness years, just to recap, remember, so nothing too much in depth, is Abdication Crisis. If you've seen The Crown, you may know all about this. If you haven't watched The Crown, watch The Crown. Got plenty of time. We're in lockdown. So the Abdication Crisis. So the main problem was that the king had fallen in love with this woman here, who was called Wallis Simpson, and she is twice divorced American. The fact that she's American, I don't know if that has an impact at all, but the fact that she was twice divorced certainly did. The king prior to this had a bit of a playboy image, which worried the government and also worried the British nation. He was determined to marry this woman, even though everything was being put forward that you shouldn't do this, that the public were unhappy, that the government would never back this. He was still very determined to marry this woman, and also thought that he could stay as king whilst doing this. One major issue is that he's the head of the church. As head of state, as king of England, Britain, the empire, all of this stuff, he's the head of the church. And as such, he should be upholding the church's values, morals, etc. And divorce is very much frowned upon, and that's not something that he should be doing. There were other concerns as well, that he was an admirer of Nazi Germany. It is believed that he applauded them for their economic recovery after World War One, and that he believed that the way that they were rebuilding was something that we could do in Britain. After his abdication, he visited Germany and visited Hitler, and this was seen as a peacekeeping visit. This was something that the British government did not want to do. This is something that the Crown did not want him to go on, but he still went on it. Whether or not this is evidence that those concerns prior to his abdication of being a Nazi German admirer is true, it's unsure. Draw your own conclusions. There's nothing cemented to say that he definitely was, but there is evidence to suggest possibly. Okay, in terms of how this puts Churchill in the wilderness and his views against the British government, Baldwin said that he wouldn't accept a marriage and that the public would never accept a marriage. And he went on to refuse the offer from the king of a morganatic marriage, which basically would mean that she would never become queen. The reasons for this would be obviously based on the public's opinion, and that this would be seen as something that really bad. The king would need Parliament's approval, not just in Britain, but also within the Dominions. And Baldwin and the government were really worried that this could lead to further calls for independence, further unrest within these Dominions. So he refused to accept this morganatic marriage. Churchill's views, it is quite widely known that he was a friend of the king. He had spent time with the king. He was a great admirer of the king. They had spent time in terms of a friendship view, and he was one of the king's friends, like a circle of political and important people who were friends with the king. Churchill also gave a speech in Parliament saying that obviously he was in support of the king, and this showed how he was out of touch with the public, and that he misjudged the mood of the public, because he was, and this put him in the wilderness and also isolated him within his own party, and people who had supported him previously went against what he was saying. A speech that Churchill gave just after the abdication, he talked about his friendship for over 25 years with the king. So we could use that as evidence to suggest that this was maybe a personal thing rather than a political thing, which again could put him in isolation from the rest of the party and the rest of Britain. But also that he put forward the idea that as an independent and unofficial, strong use of those two words, independent and unofficial, to try to make it look as though it wasn't based on personal opinion and friendship, that he had to try to use every single lawful means possible to keep him in the throne. Some people put forward a view not just about abdication, but India and other areas of politics, that Churchill was very quick to change his tact once he realised he was being isolated, and to try to draw himself back into the public eye and to political favour, that he would change his view. So here we've got an idea that maybe he's now saying that I had to try, as an independent and impartial person, to try to change all lawful means. Okay, right, that's all we're going to do on today's video. So we've done Indian independence and abdication. The next video, which will be uploaded pretty soon, will look at the appeasement and German expansion and how that links with his wilderness. Like I say, any questions, leave a comment below. We'll address those as and when. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Take care. Look after the NHS. And we'll see you all soon.